Yeah. Gotta get their fast shot. Yeah. Gotta get their fast shot. There it is.
Hello Britball Nation and welcome to The Scoop following the biggest weekend of Britball so far this year. We've been reliably informed that on Sunday some of the Britball Nation actually do something other than pay attention to our manic live coverage of each and every Britball game. Little things like working, supporting or even playing in the actual games themselves all rather inconveniently get in the way of keeping yourself up to speed with the results and ramifications from across the nation. Never fear, DC is here with a scoop of the important bits from the past weekend of Britball. This massive weekend of Britball kicked off in Sheffield on Saturday morning as we headed to the finals of the first portion of the women's season, the Opal Series 2016 playoffs. 17 of the 19 teams from this year's series were in attendance, competing for a ranking and the Opal Championship. With nearly 7 hours of fixtures across 6 pitches, this is the largest women's football event of the year and it certainly lived up to the hype. Hot favourites coming into the event were the undefeated Coventry Cougars. The Cougars are the most successful flag team in women's Britball with 2 Opal Championships to their name already, and they went through their 3 tournaments building up to the finals undefeated and largely unchallenged. Similarly, from the Southern Conference, the Northants Titans have posted an undefeated season, and after the previous year's champions, the London Warriors, had decided to pass in the Opal Series to focus on full contact football, everything was looking lined up for another big North versus South finale. But not so fast. The Hallam Warriors may have lost to the Cougars in their opening weekend of Opal, but they hadn't looked back since, and in a hard-fought semi-final they took down the Titans to set up a rematch against the Cougars, but on their own turf this time, being hosts of the tournament. DC headed up to Sheffield and filmed almost the full final between this powerhouse of flag football and the up-and-comers from Hallam. There were a few issues caused by a last-minute change to the pitch on which the final was being held, meaning everything ended up being a bit manic and we more or less missed the first 3 plays. However, we got the rest of it and you can go and watch the full finals footage on our YouTube channel. So, spoiler alert, if you didn't know already who won, which you almost certainly already do since it's got splashed all over our Facebook page, then skip like the next 30 seconds of this video while you go watch the finals footage. Have you gone? Cool. The Cougars balled out. Kudos to Hallam, who have clearly stepped up their game compared to previous seasons, but they couldn't match the experience and skills of the Cougars girls. Both teams made some great plays throughout the match, but ultimately the Coventry Cougars were able to make more of their opportunities and ran out 27-7 winners for their 3rd Opal Series title in 4 years since the series began. All that said, despite concerns about some of the top women's teams choosing to skip Opal this year to focus on contact football, it's probably been the most competitive Opal series to date, and this hard-fought final tops off a really great series. We'd like to thank both Baffle Women's Football and EP Sports for their support, which allowed DC to head up and cover this event, and we'll have more footage from the day on our YouTube channel in the coming weeks. We'd also really like to thank our friends over at pullingtheflag.co.uk who stepped up when Team DC were left short-handed due to illness and injury. Nathan Coles and Sophie Parsons, who've both written and commentated for PTF in the past and both of whom actually involved with the 3rd place finishing Northants Titans, will of course been gutted to not see their own team playing in the final itself, but stepped up to the mark at the last minute to provide some superb live commentary of the final fixture. Moving on to Uniball, and before we look at the fixtures themselves, there's a few other takeaways from this weekend that we really felt we had to cover. Firstly, it was a sad week for our burger chef. Coming into the second half of a lot of fixtures, we thought we were headed for our meatiest week of Uniball 16-17 so far, but we fell afoul of mercy clocks and injuries, and our burger graphic ultimately had to stay home. Speaking of injuries, and we know it's a tough sport, but this weekend in particular seemed to be a rough one as we saw multiple instances of players having to depart the field via ambulances, and a number of games called early due to the serious nature of the injuries and the time it took to ensure the players received the necessary care and attention. We've heard back from all the teams who had players hospitalised this week and can largely report that with time to heal, there's hopefully nothing career ending, and we're sure we'll join the rest of the Britball Nation in wishing the injured players as well as their friends, family and teammates all around them the very best for a speedy recovery and hope to see them all back on the gridiron before too long. Build back stronger, guys. And before we come to the games themselves, we were oh so close to having a full slate of games this weekend, but god damn it, Dragons! With not enough qualified coaches, the Dragons were forced to once again push back their fixture, and it looks as though they may well enter the mid-season break without a single game played at this rate. Now whoa. Put down the torches and pitchforks. In fairness to the Dragons, this does seem like it really is something that's beyond their control. The Dragons themselves have no direct involvement in their coach selection process, this being done purely by their athletic union, who it appears not only left the appointment of coaches right into the very last minute, but also despite apparently recruiting 6 coaches for the programme, only 2 qualified coaches so far have actually made an appearance at Dragons training, one too few to meet league regulations. Still, whatever way you spin it, the Dragons' grip on the season is looking sketchy at best, and at some point you have to figure that Bucks or Baffa are going to drop the hammer, which will not only be a real disappointment for the Dragons players, but also their opponents, some of whom have barely stepped out onto the field pre-Christmas either, due to issues with the AIU Rhinos jerseys and the withdrawal of the LSBU Spartans. And Bucks decided to make some mid-season changes as to how promotion and relegation work between Divisions 2 and 1, but perhaps the less we say about that the better, because while we agree that more mobility between tiers is both a big positive and really a necessity as Uniball continues to grow with more institutions joining the league every year, introducing such changes midway through the season just isn't the right way to go about it, and the new selection method of auto-promotion for conference winners seems particularly harsh considering the way Division 2 team seasons have already been cut down to just 6 games this year with no return legs, meaning we remain in a situation where more than likely we're going to have teams quite capable of competing in the tier above getting trapped for yet another year in the basement tier. Okay, and we eventually get to some Uniball. Our first Uniball fixtures got underway on Saturday, and wow were there some absolute corkers. The headliner of course has to be the Birmingham Lions welcoming the Hertfordshire Hurricanes to the Lions' Den, as Birmingham looked to right their season following a shock loss at Explosion all the way back in week 2. It's fair to say that both teams balled out in this one, and it came right down to the wire with the lead changing no less than 4 times in the 4th quarter alone. The biggest shout out however surely needs to go to Kit Varney, who having struggled early in the year and seen the Hearts QB role turned into something of a carousel, stepped up his game this weekend to the tune of throwing no less than 5 touchdown passes, answering right back every time the Lions took away the lead. Now, you can't be too down on the Lions, they came oh so close to taking this one and toppling the Canes from the number 1 spot in the conference, but in the grand scheme of things, this is the first time we've seen the Lions with a losing record since... we're gonna take a guess at 1999 when they went 3-4-1. To put that in some context, that was the same year that the Phantom Menace was released, so it wasn't just the Lions that had a crappy year in 99. Hearts found the end zone within the final 2 minutes and at 3-0 are sitting pretty atop the Prem South. With Kingston coming to town this weekend and the Titans visit currently the only fixture lined up for week 7, their goal will be to head into the Christmas break looking strong at 5-0. For the Lions, we should point out that even though they've taken back-to-back losses in their last 2 games, Elliot Walters has rushed for over 200 yards in each of those fixtures, so we feel sorry for whichever team is next on the Lions' warpath. Oh, hello Swansea. The Lions will be looking to restart what will become a truly impressive unbeaten home run that the Bees and Hurricanes have both tarnished now, and so when they welcome Premiership newcomers Swansea to the Lions' Den on Saturday, there'll be a lot of pride on the line. Get it? Pride? Line? Alright, we'll leave the puns to Snee in the power rankings. All that said, don't sleep on the Titans as they're gunning to make a statement in their first year in the Prem. Elsewhere on Saturday we had some similarly cracking fixtures as Bangor travelled to Griffins and Carnegie headed to take on a U-Clan side that's only had a single loss on their home turf in the past few seasons. Looking at Leeds Beckett and those guys are really starting to build up a head of steam as they get some of their vets back from pre-season injuries. Not only have they found a passing game courtesy of Alika Mwambingu, but their ground attack was on form too, as Carnegie were able to close out the game courtesy of a 7-minute 87-yard drive for a score, despite the Rams reportedly stacking the box with 9 guys. Meanwhile, the Mud Dogs travelled to Leeds, and while it looked like the fixture might have to be pushed back due to the broken down bus, the fixture eventually got underway under the Saturday night lights. And Bangor took a blow to their season with an oh so narrow loss. Things went awry for the Mud Dogs right from the get-go when one of their rookies didn't properly cover up a mid-range kickoff and the Griffins pounced on it, setting themselves up in the Mud Dogs' red zone right from the outset and opening up the game with an early score. Bangor came back with 3 unanswered touchdowns but crucially no conversions, taking an 18-13 lead going into the half, but then Leeds came out of the break with all guns blazing to drive in 2 scores for a 26-18 lead. With less than 4 minutes on the clock, Bangor found paydirt again but still weren't able to convert, leaving them down by 2. Despite 2 more possessions, the Mud Dogs just couldn't break through the staunch Griffins D, and now the 2A North is looking like a really tasty one, especially after the Bucks' mid-season amendments to promotion regulations. The Mud Dogs will be looking to week 10 where they'll be cheering on the currently undefeated Raptors who take on Leeds that week, as the Mud Dogs win over Liverpool followed by a Liverpool win over the Griffins is the Dogs' best hope of reclinching the top spot in the conference. Whew, and we've not even started on Sunday yet. To Sunday, and the Prem North saw 2 great matchups as some real powerhouses of Uniball went head to head. The Saints travelled north of the wall, and while early on it looked as though we were going to have a full-blown shootout on our hands, the Klansmen simply couldn't keep up with the strong crop of imports that Durham have drawn this year and the huge upgrade they've been able to provide to the skills of those around them. Stirling fall to a losing record for the first time in a long time, and while we're fairly certain they're far from done in their pursuit of the conference crown, this Saints team seems to be growing in confidence every week, and with the Prem South looking in turmoil, could this finally be the Saints' year, where they're finally placed upon the top of our power rankings? Or, you know, win a national championship. Personally, we're thinking there's far more interest in the former rather than the latter. Hopping south to Derby, and the Loughborough students answered the doubters with conviction this week as they brought the season back to even Stevens. The teams traded scores early on, but then Loughborough simply began to run away with it. Considering there was talk that Loughborough's tenure in the top tier might actually be at risk, the momentum is now clearly with the nation's top sporting uni, and they'll come out of the mid-season break looking to climb their way back into title contention, especially with 3 of their 4 post-Christmas fixtures being at home. For Derby, they've held the top spot in the rankings since week 1 on the merit of their shock opening day win over Stirling, but after a long break due to postponements, they clearly lacked momentum and were brought crashing back down to earth. In what is looking like the most competitive conference in Uniball at the moment, discussions will likely shift away from the Braves as title contenders to whether their premiership standing might be at risk, especially with a trip to tabletop and Saints on the slate for Sunday. We're a fickle bunch. Across to the Prem South, and contrary to some reports, it turns out that the Bath Killer Bees do indeed have an offence. Dom Fidani and the Bees offence stood toe to toe with the Cougars throughout this fixture, despite getting things off to the worst possible start with early scores from the Kingston side. The Bees found the end zone not once but 3 times during this what was beginning to look like a must-win fixture, but unluckily for Bath that still didn't prove enough, as tied 20-all coming into the closing minutes, the Cougars found the end zone once more and the Bees were unable to respond. A gut-wrenching loss for the Bees, who will enter the mid-season break as currently the only team to have played 5 fixtures across the opening 5 weeks, but with hope that having finally gotten things clicking on offence, they're able to turn things around in the latter half of the year and maintain their premiership credentials. To the 1A North, and we saw 2 confident victories as the Glasgow Tigers appeared to keep heating up as the season goes on. We were really hoping for a more closely fought fixture, but in fact the Tigers made short work of a Raiders side that hasn't seemingly been able to right the ship after their burger-sized blowout against Hull. This win gives the Tigers great momentum going into the Week 6 fixture against Hull, and a win there will surely lock the Tigers in as one of the favourites to be seeing Prem Ball next season. To Sunderland, and the Spartans' troubled season continues. They at least found a way to put some more points on the board than in previous weeks, but the Mustangs' offence is so hot right now, putting up 38 points before the game is called early due to declining light. Keep an eye on Northumbria making a post-season run after the break, whereas Sunderland need to find a spark else it could be Div 2 balling for the Spartans next year. In the northwest, and along with Carnegie upsetting the Rams, Hallam made short work of the Tyrants. Sure, their offence slowed down a lot in the second half, but it's fair to say the game had already gone out of reach for the Tyrants, who have really struggled with the move up to Division 1 football. In their defence, they've joined what is probably the most overall talented conference in the division, with all 4 of their conference rivals likely capable of strong post-season performances were they able to make it that far. But that's little consolation to Manchester, who put their first points on the board so far this season with a safety in their 3rd outing. In the Midlands, and we had a big top of the table clash between the Warwick Wolves and the Scholar Dollar boosted Nottingham. Both teams came out of the gates fast and looked fairly evenly matched at first, but as the game ground on, Nottingham's experience and roster depth began to show through, and the Midlands Golden Boys pulled clear in the second half, taking away a resounding 28-7 win, and surely locking themselves in as the favourites for promotion to the Prem this year, as well as setting up what should be an awesome Robin Hood Bowl come varsity season. Also in the Midlands, but down the other end of the table, we saw the Stallions and Royals square off to see who would have the dubious honour of being winless going into the mid-season break. As it happened, the heavily depleted Royals had no answer to a Stallions team that was balling out on defence on Sunday, posting up 9 forced fumbles and shutting down the Royals offence, while Staffs also posted up 3 scores of their own. We missed out mentioning just how significant this win was for the Stallions, as Sunday's victory marked the end of an 11-game slide for a team that was once one of the powerhouses of Uniball, and it goes a long way to ensuring that the Stallions are able to hold on to their Division 1 standing for yet another season. With a lot of young players on the roster, the Stallions are still developing a lot of talent after the departure of most of their veterans ahead of the previous season. This game was a must-win for the Stallions, and they stepped up to the mark when it counted most. Heading south, and the Stingers took a clear 2-score win away from the Brighton Tsunami. The Tsunami's defence seems to be regaining some of the form that saw it win a conference title last year, but the big concern is their offence that is yet to score a point this year. It could well be crowned to crumbs for the Tsunami if their offence doesn't start making some waves soon, whereas for the Stingers, victory allows them to stay tight on the heels of a Portsmouth side that narrowly edged them out of the number 1 spot earlier this year. Speaking of Pompey, the Destroyers fell behind early against the Saxons, but they quickly regained the lead before their impressive defence shut down the Saxons through the rest of the game. This allows the Destroyers, who only rose up to Division 1 this year, to go into the break perfect at 4-0 and having taken a win away from each and every one of their conference rivals. To the southwest, and we saw a really strong performance from the Exeter Demons in their away trip to Solent. The Demons are still running with a heavily depleted backfield on their offence, but very effective line plays allowing them to absolutely dominate time of possession. What's more, their D upped its game this weekend and completely shut down the Redhawks, and with the upcoming UE Bullets not expected to trouble Exeter too much this weekend, the Demons look to be in fine form to make the February 5th top of the table clash against the Cardiff Cobras a great conference deciding matchup. And finally in Division 1, the Pirates continue to struggle to right the ship after a strong season opener and have now failed to put up points in 3 straight fixtures. The win for the Falcons means Kent are able to stay hot on the heels of the undefeated Cambridge Pythons, who edged Kent by a single point back in week 3, and it looks like this conference race should come right down to the wire as tussles between the top 3 teams have been decided by the smallest of margins so far this season. To Division 2, and bear with us here because we know this scoop has turned into a longer one than usual, but this weekend was just too filled with juicy bits for us to cut it down to size too much. Following on from putting up a 50 burger over the Pyros, we had high hopes for the Teesside Cougars this year, but they took a pasting from the Predators on Sunday. Martin Harrison's offence had appeared pretty pedestrian in their 6-0 win over Heriot Watt in week 2, but whether the Cougars came into this game overconfident, who knows? What's for certain is it was a statement win from the Preds, far outstripping the 13-0 win over the Cougars managed by their cross-city rivals, the Napier Knights. Elsewhere in the Borders, and Heriot Watt mounted what is probably the comeback of the year so far as they fell behind 12-0 at the half, only to turn it around with 24 unanswered points in the second half, allowing them to really enjoy their long trip back north of the wall, leaving a shell-shocked Bombers unsure what happened. Their much delayed debut in Division 2 appeared to be getting off to the perfect start, only for Howoo to turn on the afterburners in the second half and run away with it. In the north, and alongside the number 4 ranked Mud Dogs being upset by the Griffins, we saw the Raptors continue their perfect season. Though the fixture eventually had to be called short after a suspected neck injury for a Chester Legion player led to a long delay, the Raptors go into the break perfect at 3-0, and perhaps most importantly as this conference looks like it might come down to the wire, with the Liverpool side yet to concede a single point in the year so far. At the other end of the spectrum in the 2A North, we saw the Edge Hill Vikings come and get to put up any points for their first 2 fixtures, but going up against a shaky Kiel Crusaders side, Vikings quarterback Ben Martin put up the Vikings' first points of the year off a scramble for a score before Jace Casco notched up a second. It's going to be tough for the Vikings to get back into the playoff race with 2 losses against top contenders already. However, they can still play upsetters when they take on the Leeds Griffins this weekend. In the Midlands, and the Hawks ended a 10-game skid with their victory over a DMU team that are clearly having a troubled season. The Hawks looked confident after changing up a number of things on offense, whereas the Falcons' intended week 6 fixtures had to be pushed back until after Christmas, as even at the halfway point of the year, the Falcons are yet to secure a home field upon which to play games. Meanwhile, the big story coming out of the MMU Northampton fixture was less the Eagles earning their second win of the year courtesy of an overtime hookup between Manchester Titans Juniors products backup QB Chris Hall, who stepped into the game after Phil Holker was forced out of the game with an injury, and wideout Robert Duck, than the post-game shenanigans that kicked off when a nemesis player ran across the breadth of the pitch to take a swing at an Eagles cornerback he'd been competing against throughout the fixture. The whole incident appears to have been sparked off when said player tried to insult the Eagles corner's hairstyle, and even neutral onlookers have claimed that the conduct of Northampton throughout the fixture was far from ideal, with taunting and smack talk flowing far more freely than their offence was. Needless to say, crossing the pitch to take a swing at an opposing team player on their sideline is not the smartest move in the world and led to bench clearances from both sides, though things were quickly calmed down. All in all, not the classiest of moves from a programme currently sat at 0-2 in one of the more competitive conferences in Division 2. Shame! To the southwest, and the Gladiators' hopes of entering the Christmas break 4-0 had to be pushed back after the Bulldogs' Iron Man and QB went down with what turned out to be a broken leg, and after a long delay waiting for the ambulance's arrival, the game was called. The Gladiators were 13-0 up, but without reaching the half, the scoreline won't stand. One of the big upsets of the weekend saw the power rank regulars, the Plymouth Blitz, travel along the south coast to Bournemouth. Perhaps we talked it up a bit, calling it a trap game for the Blitz if they weren't careful, and indeed the Bobcats trap was sprung. With the Bobcats leading 13-6 at the half, the Blitz offense just isn't the same without their starting quarterback on the field, and a failed 2-point conversion off their first score and a miss off their try for one in the second means that ultimately the Blitz go into the break with the hopes for a perfect season in tatters, and every game post-Christmas being an absolute must-win if the Blitz want out of the basement tier. All hopes not lost as they already took a win away from the Gotten Hot Barracuda, and so if they can take out the Gladiators in the new year, this conference could come right down to the final day of the regular season. Meanwhile, the win puts the Bobcats right back into the race for the playoffs and promotion, and a win against the beat-up looking OBU team at the weekend could see them go into the break hot on the heels of the top runners in the conference. Finally, in the southwest, the Bristol Barracuda took away a resounding victory from their trip to Oxford, putting up 33 points on a depleted OBU defence and looking like real contenders heading into the break. In the 2A South, Brunel continue their fine form with a 2-score win over BNU. We might have hoped for a more convincing offensive performance, but the shutout says a lot too, and we'll expect the Burners to head into Christmas undefeated as they face the 1 and 2 City Sentinels on Sunday. Similarly, UCL took away a 2-score win from a troubled KCL Regents team, and it was a great way for the Emperors to bounce back from the beating they took against the Stags in week 4. And finally, we get to the 2A Southeast, where we got a rare Rhino sighting as AIU welcomed the C4 Chargers to town, and might have regretted doing so as the Chargers charged right over them to the tune of a 42-0 victory that might well have gone even higher had the game not been called early due to a serious injury, this time a dislocated knee to one of the Rhinos. As ever, thoughts and wishes from the nation, build it back stronger, and we hope to see you back on the gridiron before too long. Perhaps almost as disappointing as hearing about the unfortunate injury or seeing the Chargers falling just shy of a 50 burger, we still didn't get to see AIU's new jerseys. Honestly guys, the anticipation is killing us. We've got images of something similar to Joseph's amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Big picture, Chargers go into the break undefeated, and the Rhinos have a lot of games to catch up on come the new year. Whew, that was a lot of Britball. Hopefully you'll see that we've tried really hard this week to talk to as many programs as possible to get game tape. We'd really like to thank all the teams that stepped up, and most of all to those who didn't even need to be asked and were offering up their game tape on Sunday evening, in line with our belief that one of the best things we can all do to grow this game is put it out there for people to see. Once again, congratulations and commiserations to all the teams that took the field at the weekend, thoughts and wishes to the ballers who sustained injuries, and remember that if you like this video, we'll only know about it if you hop on YouTube and give it a thumbs up. Subscribe for more, and in the meantime, play hard, play safe, and go check out our fully commentated footage of the Opal Series finals, made possible by our friends at EP Sports, American Football Kit, by Ballers, for Ballers, and Baffle Women's Football, who are leading the growth of one of the most successful sections of the Britball nation. And of course, the great guys over at pullingtheflag.co.uk, without which we'd have had no commentary.